Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me this morning for our session on media and PR for small business. My name is Christy Bailey. I'm a presenter and an advisor for Business Station as part of the Digital Solutions Commonwealth Government Program. I also am a small business owner myself and have worked in and around small business and the media and PR space for a number of years. So a lot of what we're going to go through today is based on real life experience and things that I've sort of implemented in the past. So do feel free to stop me at any time. You can contact or ask any questions through the chat or the Q&A functionality. So please make use of that. But otherwise, I'll stay on for a few minutes at the end to answer any questions that you may have as well. Okay. So getting into it, what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about the importance of PR, particularly for small businesses. We'll define media and PR and media relations and just talk about the different terms and terminology. We will talk a bit about how you can generate publicity for your small business, how you can work with influencers and what the benefits are in working with influencers. We'll also look at your customer's journey and how PR sort of fits into that. And then we'll look at social media and what your PR strategy could be, perhaps, around that. So quite a bit to get through. But before we get started, just to define what media is, well, essentially media is the main means of mass communication. So information is delivered to the public, generally through newspapers, magazines, television, radio, and then there's also a range of different ways online. So when people tend to think of the term media, they think traditional media or news outlets, but it's really not the case. Media is so much more, and there are an unbelievable number of media outlets that each individual is going to experience on a daily basis. So think about the type of media that you are in contact with daily. There's social media. There's obviously bloggers and influential people in the online space. There's YouTube influencers. There's a range of different online publications. There's podcasts. All of these things can be harnessed to really help publicize your business. Now, in a traditional sense, journalists and reporters were the people that wrote or presented the news and obviously feature stories as well. And editors controlled that content before it was published or released to the public. But what we know about media these days is that editors don't really control the final content. It's really the general public and consumers that control it a lot of the times. And you think about that from an online perspective and what you tend to see in and around that social media space, and that becomes really evident. So what you see on your screen is what we call the PESO model. Now, this is a media model strategy, and PESO stands for paid, earned, shared, and owned. So it's really important to understand what you're doing in media, in PR, and even in marketing, and where it fits into this particular model, because you really do need to use a variety of strategies across different mediums and cover every aspect of this model. Now, in the past, paid media was really the primary focus of advertising. Earned media was the primary focus of PR, and then shared and owned wasn't really anyone's focus. But today there is so much crossover that each element, as I said, has to be a key focus in your business. Now, to explain those a little bit more, paid is essentially advertising. So it could be just straight placing ads. It could be advertorials where you've got a bit of editorial that sits alongside some advertising. It could be sponsorships, sponsored content, which is content that you pay for. This could be ads on the radio, TV, print, any paid activities. So it also includes online ads, your pay-per-click advertising like in your Google AdWords network, any social media advertising that you're doing on Facebook and Instagram, sponsored posts, banner ads, so anything that you pay for basically. Earned is then news coverage. Now this is when you've earned the opportunity, and it's usually through having great relationships with the media that you have the opportunity to appear in a news story. Now, media is going to be in the specific publication as press coverage, so it's generally more believed by the public. Now, whether that's online or offline, you normally will have an online component. So think about if you actually appear in a news story, generally there's an online version of that, which will include backlinks to your business as well. Now, that earned space has the potential to reach a lot more consumers than paid or owned media. So do keep that in mind. And as I said, it tends to be a lot more believable as well, because we do trust the media and other people a lot more than we trust advertising, so to speak. The shared space is really social media, or it's user-generated content. So it's content that's not created by you as such. It's created by your people or the public, and it's constantly evolving. So what happens in this space is largely a result of your marketing and your customer service, and that tends to go into that shared space. So you can't afford any negative relations with your customers or negative interactions really at any stage of their purchase cycle, because this is where it's going to come out and really heavily impact that shared space. The owned side of things, they're your owned assets. So think about your web content, or anything that you've created and have full control over. So your website is obviously a key thing, or a blog. You may have ebooks, so you could have presentations that are online or offline, anything where you fully control the content and its distribution. So if you can add to it, edit it, delete it, then you probably own it. Keep in mind, all four categories are really important, but they're all going to be more effective when they're used in conjunction with each other or with other categories than in isolation. So we will refer back to this PESO model, but it's really important to keep it in mind and make sure that you're doing everything you can in each aspect of media to get that full reach. Okay, now have a look at a bit of a term, a PR, public relations. What is it? I believe it's a strategic communication process, and throughout that process, you build mutually beneficial relationships between your organization or your small business and the public. So to really simplify that, I think PR is having a sound strategy plus the ability to storytell. So as a small business, and many small businesses that I work with don't think that they're in the need of public relations, but they absolutely are. Think back to that model, and this is really your earned, and it really crosses over into that shared component as well. So those two areas have to be covered off, and this is where we have the opportunity to cover them off. Now, public relations is crucial to the success of every business, no matter how big or small. The main difference is that a small business tends to be a lot more budget conscious, and doesn't normally have the luxury of hiring a high price PR business or firm to run their PR strategies. So you do have to take more of a DIY approach and master your own public relations. And hopefully the content that we're going to go through today will really establish how you can do that. I think this is really interesting, having a look at the media and PR space then, so in the past, and what it's like now, because it really has evolved. In the past, brands controlled messages and customers were very simply just passive receptors. So a brand would have a message that they'd want to convey to the public. They'd use a publicist, which was a bit of a spin doctor to get that message out. That publicist had amazing relationships with the media that resulted in getting that media coverage. Now it's a little bit different. Customers are so much more empowered than they've ever been before, and everyone owns that message. So there's a lot of simultaneous communications going on, as you can see in that picture, and traditional media are really just one outlet for customers. So generating positive media or publicity is really a core function of a PR person. But it's just one of many functions. And, so previously you might have heard the term publicist, but that's really achieving an outcome, as in, an article in a newspaper. It doesn't really talk about the research, the strategy, the messaging, the communications that we're dealing with now in a very different public relations program, essentially. Hopefully that makes sense. But the key message with these images that you see on the screen is really that customers are more empowered than they ever have been before. Okay, so to get good publicity, you absolutely have to build solid media relations or relationships with the media. It is important for your business because journalists do like dealing with people that can assist them in their work and make their job easier, essentially. The media is really fast-paced, and journalists don't have the time to go out and research stories for themselves and sort of find that information. So they are very much relying on people coming forward or things that they hear through social media and that kind of thing to pick up on stories. So if you can provide them with an easy story, then it's going to be a win-win. So you have to think about really, first of all, developing a news sense. You have to know what information each media outlet presents and to know what sort of items are going to be of interest to them. So think about some of the media that you like to consume. Think about your target market and what sort of media outlets they might be looking at. Have a look at when you're developing a news sense, determine who the audience is for that particular media outlet. So who are their listeners, who are their readers, who are their followers? You can look at past content that they've produced to determine what they like to write about, or what kind of topics are going to be of interest to them. It's really important to develop an understanding of the difference between just general news and then featured journalists. There's a difference between consumer media and trade media as well. Consumer media is going to look for stories that appeal to the public, whilst trade media is going to be interested in material that is of interest to the industry, so more a B2B space. So keep that in mind. Really getting to know the media that you're looking to get coverage in is a crucial element of building those solid media relations. You have to know lead times as well. Lead times and deadlines for the media that you're targeting are absolutely crucial. If it is something like traditional and it's general news, or even radio and television, they may have a shorter lead time, whereas feature articles might be prepared and produced a lot further in advance. And then in terms of social media, obviously, again, a lot shorter lead time as well. So really develop an understanding of the lead times. Get to know specific people, the names of journalists and their contact details. Find out how they best like to receive communications, whether that be media releases or other information. So you develop yourself a bit of a database that sort of outlines this information. Now, a question I always get from a media or PR perspective is, how do you actually develop that database or get to know the specific people? And that really comes down to doing your research. As you're developing a news sense, you might be having a look at what kind of journalist names are popping up. You might use tools like LinkedIn to find out a little bit more information on the various journalists. So really work this into more of a database kind of structure where you're spending the time to get to know the media outlets, deadlines, people, and collating that information by way of some kind of, even something as simple as a spreadsheet or using your database software that you have now, so that you're actually actively recording this info. Being accurate is really important. So always provide accurate information and make sure that you provide it on time. So if you're the contact on a media release, and we will talk about media releases in a bit more detail shortly, but if you're that contact, make sure you're responsive. If someone calls you because they've seen your name on a media release, make sure that you're getting back to them straight away. But in the first instance, when you're actually providing information to the media, it has to be spot on. As you know, the media now tends to produce information and then sort of fact check later. So you want to make sure that if you're the person providing them the information that they're going to publish, it's accurate, so that they're not having to correct your mistakes in their media outlet, whatever that might be, whether it's online or offline. Invite them. I don't think it can hurt to invite them to your business to see or experience your product or service if and when you think that's appropriate. Whether that be for something like an opening or an event or something specific, or just generally come down and try it out for yourself at some stage at your leisure, or whatever that might be. It really depends on your business and the industry that you're in as to whether or not that's appropriate. But if there is someone that you're specifically targeting, why not invite them to experience the product or service themselves? You might find this in the world of influencers, or some media approaching you to experience your product or service. Sometimes they want that free of charge. Just really depends on what the agreement is. We'll talk a bit about that, or a bit more about that, when we speak about influencers. But certainly with journalists, absolutely invite them. if it's appropriate, of course. Don't forget local media. So get to know your local media, particularly if you happen to be regional. Local media tend to be a lot more hungrier for news than they do in the capitals. So really make an effort to get to know who your local media are. Now, this could be radio, television, local newspapers. The staff and editors there tend to have less stories they want to actually work with, but they want to make it more locally focused. So if you've got a great story or some information that's relevant to your business, which is local in their particular area, then obviously that's going to appeal to them. Once you've worked hard to develop a bit of a database, definitely keep in regular contact. Once you've established the relationship, I would be touching base as regularly as is appropriate. You don't want to make it too often to annoy anybody, but you do want to keep those relationships in place because you might be only producing stories or have, anything that's media or newsworthy every couple of months, for example, or every 6 months, but you still want to make sure that when you do have that critical piece of info that you want to get to the media or that really exciting story, that your contacts are accurate and you've still got that right database. Now, keep in mind what we're talking about here is building media relations for the purpose of getting publicity or getting some kind of media coverage. So this is just a tactic, and that is just one component in that earned space of that PAYSLO model. So public relations requires more of a planned strategy and takes time and covers all of those elements of the model. Okay, now in terms of, and just to finish off into the generating publicity or that earned space, publicity is all about spreading the word about your business through these non-advertising channels and earning media. So through good media relations, you know who the media are and how to maintain a good relationship with them, as we discussed. You still need to keep in mind that they're going to want newsworthy stories that are timely. So, there's some kind of time factor around them, that they're different or unique, have a human interest element, or provide some kind of eye-catching and emotive visuals. So it has to be something that they can report on that perks the interest of their audience. So that could be readers, viewers, listeners, followers. So you do have to keep that in mind. Once you have that, you can communicate with the media in a number of ways. So writing a media release is the most common, and we'll talk about the structure of a media release shortly. You may produce a newsletter. Now, this newsletter might go out to your database, but also incorporate a media database into that or have a media-specific database. In both cases, you'll have to have some good visuals to go along with it. So photos or video that really adds to the content that you're speaking about and paints that picture even more. You can use online news centers to distribute your stories or other distribution centers, or obviously sending it out to your database, but you can also use social media as well, making sure that you're sharing, tagging, and using hashtags that are relevant to the media outlet as well. Okay, so let's have a look at writing a media release. To get to the media, this is absolutely the most common way to generate publicity. A media release is a document that you send out to the media that details anything that could be classified as news. So journalists take the media release, and if they find it interesting and appealing to their audience, they're going to write an article about it. Depending on the journalist and on the publication, sometimes they're going to publish what they read. Sometimes they'll rewrite it and create their own story. They might come back to you and check some facts and get some further information. But it really comes down to the individual. So in the past, I would have said that a media release is just a statement of information for them to reach out to you and ask more, but that's just not the case anymore. They are often publishing what they read in the media release. Sometimes they will publish just what they think and then worry about fact checking at another time. So you can kind of see that on social media sometimes, where journalists are just getting a story out there and then worrying about, the general public and whatnot later, and other people correcting them. And it gets a little bit messy in that sense. But a lot of the time it is the public correcting stories because, like we said earlier, consumers and customers are so much more empowered because of social media than they ever have been before. So because the news world is so fast paced, the journalists would rather be first to get something up and online live, even if it's slightly inaccurate, and then worry about fixing it up a bit later. So if you've got something newsworthy, someone picks it up, the best thing about it is that the promotion that you'll get from it as a result of any media coverage is free. So you also generally have, if it's a traditional outlet, you'll have those online components that I mentioned. So it could be a website, social media. So you generally be covered in more than just print. So you obviously get the free marketing through that media avenue, but via their website, you get links back, which is great for SEO, but also great for generating traffic to your site. So it is a great way to build your brand, a great way to gain credibility within the industry that you're in as well. But do keep in mind that it's very competitive. You have to make sure that your media release is the one that grabs the attention of journalists. And the best media releases are written, I find, in this inverted pyramid format that you see on your screen. So in terms of the release itself, first of all, you'd have a headline, which isn't on that pyramid, but your headline's generally about 5 words. I wouldn't make it any more than that. And it has to be very catchy to get the journalist to read further. That's also something which I will talk about, but you would use on your subject line if you're sending it out by email as well. So it's 5 words. It's going to be that decider of, am I going to read more about this or am I going to delete, essentially? Then in terms of this pyramid, you've got the lead. Now, the lead is the first part. Now, that is really the most newsworthy information, the who, what, where, when, why. And this is really the hook to draw that journalist in further. From there, you've got the body, which is important details and the main argument, essentially. So what is it that is that main story, and evidence to back that up too. So evidence by way of statistics, quotes are fantastic. Quotes are absolutely crucial in a media release. Now, a quote should be from an authoritative figure. Obviously, you need to have their approval to quote them. And the quote should provide that evidence and really back up what your key argument is. And really, like I said, just add that credibility to the story. So really think about who is the most appropriate person to be quoted in your article. Now, all media releases should be written in third person. So the person that you're quoting could be yourself as the CEO or as the business owner. It could be an authoritative figure, from a licensing. So let's say it's a government official. If you're talking about a new product, service, or something that's just been licensed and released. It could be the head of an industry organization. It could be absolutely anyone, one of your biggest customers, for example, but something that's going to back up the statement. Then you've got the tail. Now, the tail is extra related information. It could be a bit of background on the business, some extra details, or just additional content, factual content. So the key thing about a media release is that it is written in third person. It is a factual statement. So avoid hype, avoid things like exclamation marks, and more descriptive words don't tend to be used in a media release, so to speak. So it is really a factual statement. It's then up to the journalist to add their spin on it. But do keep in mind, most people that are involved in small business, whether you're the business owner or the marketing person, you want to have that sales appeal to it. You want to have that sales spin on things. So you almost write it from a marketing perspective, but this is not designed to be something that is a marketing document, essentially. So do strip it back so it's more factual and evidence-based. Then you've got to distribute it. So you've got something interesting to say. You've written your media release. Now you've got to get it out. Now, to get good reach with your media release, you have to have that excellent database of industry-specific media that I mentioned. You need to really know the right contacts to get the exposure that you're chasing. So that's the part that takes time and effort. But as a starting point, I would distribute this media release to local newspapers. As I mentioned, that tends to be a quick win. Local broadcasters, TV and radio, if that's relevant. Think about any industry-specific publications. If you're a member of the Chamber of Commerce, they may have a newsletter that goes out, and that will go out to other businesses. So again, adds a bit of value there. Any other relevant organisations that you're a part of. Now, that could be state or national. So just keep that in mind. It could be anyone. It could even be regional. So state, national, regional. Other distribution might be through media agencies, I should say, like the Australian Associated Press or any other industry-specific distribution centres that you have access to. The release should be addressed to the right person because you've done the work developing that database. Hopefully it does go out to the right person. If not, if you're not sure, try and do a bit of follow-up to see if you can get that person's details so it doesn't just end up in an unmonitored inbox. But otherwise, you might mark it to the attention of the person's title. So, for example, food editor or travel editor or, health and wellness editor, whatever that might be. But I think that's second option. First option is always to have it go to the correct person. Now, email distribution of media releases is very widely accepted. Where possible, I would paste your media release into the body of an email as opposed to sending it as an attachment. You would use the subject line as your headline. So whatever the headline is, I do get media releases from time to time. And a lot of the time, the subject line is company XYZ media release, which really isn't that exciting. And then they're relying on you actually opening the email or opening the document to see what it's all about. Why not use the subject line as the catch, the exciting headline of your actual media release? So that's fine. And like I said, paste the body of the media release into the body of an email rather than an attachment. It's just one less step for the recipient. Using your media relations, you will really know how best they like to receive media releases, but I would say that email is most common, but it is good to check. Definitely send with high-res images. If you attach those images, there could be concerns around blocking up people's inboxes, so you might want to have a link to high-res images or a low-res image attached and then a note to say contact us for high-res images. So keep that in mind. Now, when you are sending media releases by email, if you're sending them to a bit of a database or a large number of companies, absolutely use the BCC, the blind carbon copy functionality. You don't want a long list of journalists appearing on each other's recipient list. Bad etiquette, and it will really annoy people. So do keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that you might need to tailor your release for each audience. So what might be relevant and what the key pitch of a story is to your local newspaper, for example, might not be relevant for a trade publication. So you might have to make some small adjustments. Even though the story is the same, you might be just tailoring it a little bit to be relevant to that media outlet. So I would say it's not uncommon to have 2 or 3 versions of the same media release. And so that's generally it in terms of sending your media release. If you do follow a lot of those tips that I've mentioned, you should get a bit of cut through. But as I mentioned, the key thing is really going to be developing that list in the first place. And that's what takes time and effort. Use industry organisations that you're a member of to try and get some help, advice, contacts, or even use them to forward on your media release, which can really help you. Okay, so going back to the PASO model, publicity is what we've sort of been talking about when it comes to media releases and coverage in publications. So that's just really about the earned media. And it does go on to the shared space, of course, as well. But keep in mind, public relations is about all media, so all 4 elements, and literally fits in with each and every element in the PASO model. So you have to incorporate something in each element into your marketing strategy. So now we're going to talk about influencers who sit in the shared and the paid space. So you may know the term social influencers. It really isn't anything new. Social influencers have been around in various forms forever. So think about, 50 years ago, there may be someone that has a specific influence, is invited to certain events, whether they be opening events, parties, that kind of thing, because of the credibility that it gives the event or because of the crowd that they might draw by being there. So these days it's very, very similar. But these days when we talk about influencers, it really refers to people that are in and around the internet that possess a significant credibility or considerable reach within a target audience. Now, influencer marketing is very popular, and it can be a really effective form of marketing at very low cost, a great way to generate some positive PR. Now, influencers have the power to affect purchasing decisions, as well as really encourage a high level of interest because of their authority or their knowledge or their position even, but definitely their relationship with their specific audience. And an audience that they actively engage with. Now, the size of the following depends on the size of their topic or niche as well. So keep in mind, an influencer can be a topic expert. It could be a thought leader. They can be brand advocates. And they come in the form of bloggers, YouTubers, podcasters, social media influencers. So even celebrities or other key opinion leaders like journalists, academics, or other industry professionals can be thought of as influencers. They're essentially people with an above average influence on their specific audience. So in my opinion, social media has devalued this form of PR a little bit because there has been a bit of a increase in the number of fakes or wannabe influencers that tell you they have huge followers and they want something for nothing to cover your product or service and don't really deliver on what they've promised. So you do have to be really mindful of that, but you can be very strategic about how you work with influencers as well. So some tips around that is that true influencer marketing should be directed by you, I believe, which it means you should approach them rather than the other way around. If it is you that's approaching them, it means you've done your research. It means that you've formulated this into part of your marketing plan, and it just is a little bit more strategic. It's not to say that you should never agree to an opportunity where they've approached you, but I think to be planned, you should be doing your research and actively approaching people. Now, this does also involve leveraging the influencers in your content marketing as well. So your website, your socials, your blogs, as opposed to just letting them post on theirs. So I think there has to be a bit of both. And it has so many benefits if you do it right. So as I mentioned earlier, increased traffic, increased leads, customers. So there are huge benefits if you do acknowledge all of those aspects. The reason it works is because we trust friends or colleagues and experts more than we trust advertising. So it's not seen as advertising as such. There are influencers that really devote their time and resources to creating authentic relationships with the people that matter most to them, which is their audience. So if you find an influencer who has an audience that perfectly matches your key target market, then that'll be the huge or the main key to your success. Their audience has to match yours. There is a bit of a key criteria to determine if it's going to work for both your company and the influencer. First of all, the value to the influencer. You need to know what's in it for them. They're not going to work for free. So sometimes it could be a financial payment. It could be a product or an experience in exchange for the posts that they're going to do or the deliverables that they'll agree to. And sometimes, sometimes there is a payment element and a product element as well. So a bit of both. So you do need to know what the value is to the influencer. You need to know what their demographics are of their audience and make sure that perfectly matches your audience demographics. You do have to make sure that they have a reasonable reach. So the size of their audience is important. Size alone isn't enough. You do need to make sure that there's engagement with their audience. So look at their past posts, look at the likes, the comments, and the shares, and really look for that true and genuine engagement there. So can you see that there is a lot of engagement between not only the public or their audience, but is the influencer engaging back with them? So sometimes you see an influencer where they've got a decent sized audience, they make a post, and then tons of people get on and start asking questions. This product looks great. Where can I get it from? And then the influencer just isn't responding. you're looking for that true engagement to know that they are answering those questions, that, you know, when someone reaches out with information about a product, questions about a product, that they're actually there being that brand advocate, that they're going to be paid for on some level. So that engagement is absolutely crucial. Don't forget that it is easy to get likes and get followers. So there's a lot of ways around that. So always look out for that true and genuine engagement. I would also look at the quality of their writing style and their photography, and make sure that it matches your brand, and the consistency is the same and matches how you would speak with your target market as well. So that's really important. Also have a look if they've got connections to other influencers. So are they respected or known in the industry? You may even have an industry body that you can run this by. Just say, look, we've been approached by this influencer. Have you worked with them before? And you might find that someone in your industry has the experience of having worked with them or not before. It is a fantastic form of PR if it's done right and if it's done strategically. Now, if you have someone approach you that seemingly has a good deal, and I do get this all the time, where someone will come through to you, you've got this massive database, massive number of followers, this huge reach, each post I do gets thousands of likes, comments, shares, etc., etc. You start looking into them more and you realize that their audience isn't the type of person or isn't your target market. Therefore, that person is not going to represent the typical customer that's going to buy your product or service. Then it's okay to say no. There won't always be. And in most cases, that won't match. You do have to make sure that it's a perfect match for your audience. And that's really the key thing. Okay, so thinking about how else you can generate good PR. Of course, your customers are a key way to generate good PR and valuable PR. But in order to do so, you have to engage with them. Now, 88% of people are said to be influenced by reviews and online comments, which is really this shared space that we're talking about. So keeping that in mind, do you know what's being said about you online, and have you been part of that conversation? So I would really encourage you to have a look at what your reviews are doing now. Now, you might have industry specific review sites, but at the very least, you'll most likely have Facebook reviews, Google reviews. So go on and have a look at those reviews and see what people are saying right now, and have a look at your responses. So people will actively look for how a company responds to reviews as well. Some people will pop negative reviews on there, rightly or wrongly, but how the company deals with that makes all the difference. So really have a look at that. Do a bit of an audit of your business and assess your business and what it's looking like from a review perspective. Keep in mind, when you are responding to reviews, you're really doing so not only to talk back to the original reviewer, but for the purpose of everybody else that may read them. So do keep that in mind as well when you're responding. Don't be defensive, which sometimes we do see in small business just because you're passionate about your products and services. But yeah, try to avoid that defensiveness and really respond to any reviews, positive or negative. Keep in mind, social pressure can tarnish your brand as quickly as you grow it. Fingertips are always on the move. So a key factor of PR is that you're there to join that conversation. Now, people will, whether they're waiting in a line and a little bit disgruntled about service, they can quickly let their friends know on Facebook or other mechanisms, or whether, there's been a major service error, they can make a more of a complaint style sort of review online. So no business is perfect, and virtually everyone in any industry will have to deal with customer complaints at some point. So keep that in mind. How you handle the complaint makes all the difference. Obviously, handling complaints in a face-to-face scenario is the most effective, because then you can really address an issue that's, as it's happening or before it gets to the point where someone's frustrated enough to let it go online. But sometimes in small business, there are reasons that you don't handle complaints well. They tend to be because businesses are too busy, can be too defensive. Like I said, sometimes you can be defensive online and sometimes you can be defensive in person, just trying too quickly to come up with a solution or not believing that there's a problem in the first place. If you've got staff, sometimes staff can be intimidated by a lack of training, or not being trained on complaint handling specifically, or unsure of their level of empowerment. Sometimes there aren't any procedures, or there's a procedural breakdown when it comes to complaints as well. So any of those reasons that you don't handle complaints well can have a serious impact on the shared media space and result in some really negative PR. Now, it can be very difficult to make that go away online, so it's much easier to make sure it never gets online. So those face-to-face or in-person or direct customer complaint handling processes and procedures are absolutely crucial to really avoid any negative PR online. Okay, so in terms of how you can help bring in positive PR from your customers, well, there really are three elements to engaging with your customers on social media. They're in no particular order, but they are all very much interlinked. So first of all, you need to listen. You need to be online and be listening to what's being said about your business or to your business online. Now, keep in mind, you can obviously do this through your own review alerts and through your own channels, but there are also tools for social monitoring where you can track mentions of your brand. You can track competitors, what's going on in and around your competitors or events. So absolutely have a look at that. There's other brand and reputation tools as well where you can gauge what the overall opinions are of people on your brand online. But have a look at Google reviews, have a look at your Facebook reviews or any other industry review channels that you might have, but really listen to what's being said about you. Monitoring will just tell you what is being said, but listening, really listening and having a look for trends and that kind of thing might tell you why. And there may be things that you can correct or learn from that. Talking is the next element. So talking back to people, talking to them by responding to reviews, talking with pictures, talking with media releases to get that PR out there, or engaging with customers on social media. Now, again, I see a lot where you have a company that will, for example, schedule posts. So you have posts going out at specific intervals or at specific times. And then you've got customers engaging with you on those posts and asking questions about things and trying to engage with you, but the company isn't there to respond. So that two-way conversation is absolutely crucial. So engaging with your customers is vital. Engaging with influencers, as we said, really helps build that PR space, the shared space. Talking to customers when they're physically with you and encouraging them to get online so that you can continue that conversation in a social media space is fantastic as well. Now, to do that, you should be supporting people. So you should be directing them to the channels that they can talk to you, providing links to your socials, whether that be on your email signature, in store, perhaps mentioned if you've got a store, or anywhere that you can advertise those social links, be absolutely vital so that you have somewhere, a mechanism where you can listen to people and a mechanism to be able to talk back to them once they've started reaching out to you. So definitely advertise your social media channels and where they can leave feedback. So whether that's your preferred review sites or other review sites that are relevant to your industry. Make sure that you make it very easy for them to find all of these outlets so that they can then talk to you and it gives you something to listen to. Now, a crisis may strike even if you've done everything right. So there's a number of crisis situations that are more common now than they ever have been before. Things in and around the COVID space. Now, hopefully that's really died down, but do keep in mind that that's the most common sort of crisis that we were seeing with small business, was that your regular small business that will not normally ever have a crisis all of a sudden had times where they had to close down because of cases or had close contacts and those kind of things. And like I said, hopefully we're past that. But it has sort of shown that any business is open to a crisis situation. Now, even if you've done everything right, a crisis could strike. And to get through it the most effective way, the biggest recommendation is that you have a plan before a crisis strikes. Now, in that plan, you will identify a spokesperson. That's really the key thing, who it is in the organisation that is going to be responsible for talking to the media. That way, everybody in the organisation is clear that this is the person, this is the go-to should anything occur. That person needs to be providing information in a timely manner, so quickly. They need to be honest, open, and transparent when they're providing that information. You should also keep in mind, as an organisation, you absolutely have to keep your employees and other key stakeholders informed. Also, communicating with customers and suppliers is crucial as well. So making sure that you're the one that's producing that information, as opposed to waiting for customers, employees, stakeholders, or suppliers to come through and contact you to find out info. Depending on the crisis, you need to consider how often you update all of those key stakeholders, I guess. You should be updating them early and often. Also, don't forget social media. You may like to be updating people on social media, or it could be the general media. So it could be, going through to various news or television channels. It just really depends. News or newspaper channels, I should say. It really depends on the type of crisis, the nature of your industry, and the involvement that your business has in this particular crisis. But the key point here is have a plan. Even if it's just the basic shell or outline of a crisis plan, have something in place, because in a crisis situation, there tends to be a bit of panic, which creates a bit of disorganization sometimes. Just being able to refer back to a plan will keep you on track. Okay, so we've just about come to the end of today's webinar, and I do hope it's given you a greater understanding of PR, the paid, the earned, the shared, and the owned elements, and that you're more confident to be able to build your brand across all areas, remembering that you do need to have something in place in all areas, not just some. So maybe just do an audit from today and have a look at what are you actually doing in each of those spaces. But my top tips to build your brand are, first of all, always factor in that PESO model and don't leave out any component. Media releases are very important. Try and craft compelling stories on new and interesting things that happen in your business. I'd aim for a target of at least a few per year. Definitely promote your story or your expertise and that of others in your business. In your owned, your earned, and your shared media, it's relevant in all of those areas, but try and make it personal and tell your story or the story behind your brand. For cheap and effective PR, look at sponsorship opportunities, look at participating in charitable or community events, or events that are relevant to your industry or to your business. The key thing here is to really make sure that their audience matches yours. So if you're sponsoring an event, for example, and you've got a room full of 1,000 people that are all your typical target market, then it is absolutely, a great media and marketing opportunity to have your brand in front of that audience. In the case that it's not your target market, then there's no value whatsoever. So it can be time and effort and money wasted in that sense. So do look at that. Influencers absolutely work. So reach out to influencers in your industry, but do your research. Make sure that you're very clear on who the influencer is, who their target market is again, and that the deliverables are clear. So you know exactly what you're giving them and what they're giving you in return. The last tip there is to look at Google Alerts. Google Alerts will allow you a free mechanism to track what's being said about you online. So set a Google Alert up in your Google account. You choose specific keywords, I should say, that Google will then report on. Once they're set, you'll get a notification via email anytime those keywords appear online. So things like your brand or your business name are a great one. But do make the keywords specific, because otherwise you're going to be getting lots of a big list of areas that keyword's being used, and it might not be relevant. So yeah, your brand name is always a good one and a bare minimum, but think of other keywords that might be relevant to your business. All right, well, that's it from me. If anyone has any questions, I will stay on now to answer them. So please shoot them through on the Q&A or the chat functionality. Keep in mind that we've just scratched the surface today. So if you're wanting to know more, you can book a one-on-one appointment with any of our advisors through the Digital Solutions Program. This is a Commonwealth government funded program, so I'd highly encourage you to make use of it if you haven't already. For just $44, you can get access to 3 one-on-one sessions with an advisor, and we have advisors that specialise in a range of different topics. And then you can make up the difference and additional hours through webinars, workshops, and further learning. So it's a great opportunity for small businesses. There is a bit of eligibility around that. So you do have to have an ABN that's registered in WA, Queensland, or NT, be operating for profit, and employ fewer than 20 full-time staff. But if that's you, have a look at that link to register and certainly take advantage of the government funding while it lasts. Like I said, I'll stay on now to answer any questions, but thank you again for joining me and good luck with your media efforts.